Hey there! So this week I wanted to talk about tips and tricks to succeed in undergrad as a STEM major. So my first piece of advice is ask for help and ask early. I think it's super important to reach out to your teaching staff and your classmates and your advisors early on to figure out where you're missing something and figure that out so that you're not going to continue making those same mistakes. I think we sometimes feel like asking for help or asking questions is a weakness, or it means we're not good enough, or that we have to continue to prove ourselves, and that's just not true. As soon as I felt comfortable asking for help, I realized I was just doing myself a disservice by spending hours on Google hoping that some random PDF I found of another school's lecture was really going to help me understand, and it usually didn't. But what did help me understand was asking my professor what the hell he meant in class. I think it's super important that you feel comfortable asking for help from your professors because they're really there to make sure that you're learning the material and that you're succeeding. They're invested in making sure that they're actually teaching you and not just repeating something over and over again that's not clicking. One thing I found was not knowing what I didn't know, especially as a first gen student. I wasn't sure if the thing I didn't understand was actually how they were teaching it and the way they were teaching it. Maybe I just couldn't understand that way, or maybe I just actually didn't understand the material. That was the biggest thing that I really had to get over. Learning that you can just ask for help is super important. It sounds really hard at first, but once you actually break the seal and start reaching out and advocating for yourself, it gets so much easier. And it's really important because if you're making mistakes, you want to make sure that you understand why. And that way you can continue to succeed without holding yourself back. Going off of that, make sure that you're going to office hours. They are so important, and they're not just valuable because you have so much time with your teaching assistants and your professors. You also have a room full of your classmates doing the same material as you, and that's super important. I was very excited about office hours when I learned about them as a freshman. I remember we had a math question center, which is where everyone in the math classes would get together, and we had teaching assistants that would kind of go around and answer different questions. But more importantly, we had everyone else there too. So it was super valuable because if I didn't understand one thing, but I understood something else, I could help somebody else out with that, and they would help me in return. And that's really when I learned that we're all in this together, and I can ask for help, that my classmates are also learning the same thing and figuring out maybe why we don't understand certain things. Office hours are also super important because you can ask your teaching assistant and your professors about how this class fits into your career path, into your degree, how you can move forward with this, if there's other classes you might want to take later on, if there's any opportunities they know of that might help you, and just kind of get to know your field a little bit better, I think. I think we all believe we'll remember every single thing because it's so important, and that's just not true. It's super important that you take notes, and it's also super important that those notes work for you. I see a lot of different study accounts out there who post photos of beautiful calligraphy of their physics homework, and there's just beautiful photos that they've drawn on them, but that might not help you at all. Honestly, if something works for one person and not another, then you shouldn't feel guilty about that. We all have our different learning styles, and some things work for us, some things don't. And it's really just trial and error, honestly. For me, I learned that doing a lot of color coding in my lecture notes was super helpful, and also I figured out different notations I could do to really know where to look in my notes. Another thing I learned was if my professors were providing the lecture notes ahead of time and I printed them out or I saved them on my computer, I could take notes along with those. So then when my professor said something in class with a slide, I could say, oh yeah, this is when he started talking about this, these things are related, and even though they're totally different concepts, they actually come together. I think figuring out whether you're a visual learner, whether taking notes one way or another works for you, it's just super important to figure out how you're going to learn the best. So similar to taking notes, make sure that you're going to class ready. I know that especially in undergrad, you're exhausted sometimes, and that 7 a.m. lecture is just a drag, but you get so much more out of it if you're ready and you're prepared. I know that my morning lectures really felt like a killer sometimes, but the days that I made sure I was wide awake before I got to class, I took really good notes, and I followed up maybe with my professor or my teachers afterwards, I just felt much better about it and I learned so much more. I think it's really important that you do the reading beforehand. As much as we all say that we've done it and maybe we just skimmed, it is really important that you have a solid understanding, because sometimes that reading will give you the foundation so that when you actually get to class and the professor's talking about a bunch of stuff, those things are going to click. If you don't do the reading beforehand, if you don't do the homework beforehand, if you're just not ready, when they're talking about that, nothing's going to sink in and it's just going to be a waste. You're going to be sitting in lecture not understanding anything because you can't make that make sense to you. It just doesn't click. And that's just because you weren't prepared sometimes. And sometimes you come entirely prepared and it still doesn't click, and that's okay too. That's when you need to just learn how to ask for help and ask questions and make notes of the things that aren't clicking to you in class. It's really important to have all of those resources with you. Sometimes just bringing the reading with you so that you can go back to it, bringing your notes to class so that you know what questions you have and can ask there. It'll really help you out in the long run. So, going off of the office hours tip, your classmates are such a valuable resource, and your study groups are going to help you out so much. If you start forming study groups early on in your undergrad career, you'll realize that you're going to take a lot of the same classes as these people, so you can continue having those same study groups. I ended up working my senior year with the same study groups I formed my freshman year because we had very similar classes still, and so we would just keep seeing each other. We actually became really good friends. I love the people I formed study groups with. There's no way that you can do differential equations at 3 a.m. in a dining hall eating ice cream and going from crying to laughing if you didn't have that great of a group to work with. And I had been with them for so long at that point that they understood the ways I learned really well, I understood the ways that they learned really well, and we really just helped each other out. Study groups are really valuable for emotional support as well as academic support. So, my last bit of advice is really just talk to upperclassmen. You can read the class evaluations, the rate my professors as much as you want, but you're never going to get the best idea of what a class was like, what a professor is like, how you can prepare yourself for your degree as you would if you just talk to upperclassmen. Your advisors are there to make sure that you're really getting to where you need to be, but upperclassmen are going to tell you what they've been through, and I think that they're just very honest about it sometimes because they've learned by trial and error, and they're very happy to help you out so you don't make the same mistakes sometimes. For me, I would buy my textbooks at the beginning of the semester from upperclassmen, and when I would get them, I would ask them, hey, how did you succeed in this class? What things do I need to know going in that will make it really make sense for me? How can I work with this professor? Is there anything I should know? And they had a lot of experience that they could relay back to me, and that was really helpful. It was also really helpful because they could tell me different opportunities that they had found out about, things that their friends had had. So sometimes maybe they didn't know about an opportunity or some kind of really cool chance that they would have until later, but they can give me that information now so I still have a chance for it. There's definitely a lot of different ways that you can succeed in undergrad, especially when you're a STEM major, but I think that sometimes just having support systems is super important, and I really hope that I can just create a community that is supportive and welcoming for everyone. I think it's super important to know that you can do this, that you're still learning, and just give yourself credit, honestly. If you have any other questions, feel free to send me a message, leave me a comment. I really love hearing from you, and I really love knowing what things that you want to hear more about. So I hope to hear from you soon, and until then, I hope you're all doing well.